Welcome to the Ticket Podcast. The Ticket Podcast is a motivational and educational podcast created to inspire people to chase their dreams and achieve their goals. We sell tickets to health, wealth, and happiness. The only question left to ask is, what's your ticket going to be? This episode of the Ticket Podcast is brought to you by the Sports Business and Leadership Association. Members of the SBLA believe that charity is a contact sport. The SBLA is a 501c3 nonprofit that provides underprivileged children unique sports experiences. You can visit the SBLA website at www.nationalsbla.com and visit the gift shop to wear your support. Today's ticket is with Rana Dershowitz. Rana is a double Harvard graduate, was a member of the Harvard ski team, and has been the general counsel of multiple sports companies, including the Madison Square Garden and the United States Olympics Committee. Rana currently resides in Aspen, Colorado, and is the general counsel and senior VP of the Aspen Ski Corporation.
All right, welcome to the Ticket Podcast. On this episode, we have Rana Dershowitz, who is a friend of mine and a member of the Sports Business Leadership Association. She is an incredible person, attorney, business professional, and she has a sports path, sports story. So I think this will be a great podcast for everyone to listen to, and sure get a lot of nuggets of information, also be inspirational. Rana, we recently had a meeting with Tony Dungy about a fundraiser we're doing. And I mean, obviously everyone knows Tony Dungy, kind of legendary NFL head coach, player, Hall of Famer, first African-American Super Bowl champion, stuff like that. And the first thing he said to us without any other hesitation was, what are you doing now and what is your dream? So we've started kind of adopting that. So Rana, what are you doing now and what is your dream?
It's a great way to start. What am I doing now? Right now, I work for the Aspen Skiing Company. I am the Senior Vice President Real Estate and Chief Legal Officer, which actually does not articulate what I really do here. Pieces of it, but not all of it. I oversee the legal team here, the sustainability team, the PR team, and the planning team here. I am a skier and have been since I was 2.5 years old. So coming to live in the mountains with a company that is as amazing as the Aspen Skiing Company has been pretty incredible for me. Really a dream come true in many ways. What am I hoping to do? God, I don't know. I feel like I have been incredibly fortunate. I have had 3 different dream jobs. You know, most people say their goal is to have their dream job once in their life. I feel like I've had it 3 times in my life already. I don't know that I get to have another dream. I'm pretty happy with where I am.
Yeah, I would say based on my having wanted to be a sports lawyer coming out of law school and meeting a lot of people that want to be sports lawyers or are, I would say that your 3 jobs in sports law really were all 3 dream jobs in a lot of ways, which is incredible. One thing I've never asked you before is, obviously, Harvard undergrad, Harvard Law School, but why sports? Why have you chosen a life where you work in sports?
It's a great question. One of the things that my parents instilled in both my brother and I that I am super hopeful to instill in my own kids is a belief that your job is a job for a reason, right? They pay you. It's not always going to be fun. But it is the thing that you spend, other than sleeping, the most amount of your time doing for the longest period of your life. And so what they instilled in both of us was a real belief that to be successful, or a statement of success, would be if you were able to have your hobbies and have your passions be your career. And so when I was a kid, I was an athlete. I had delusions of grandeur about going to the Olympics. I was never going to get there. But I was a solid athlete, and I played all different kinds of sports. Like I said, I skied. I was a ski racer through college. That was actually the sort of core sport that I did. But in high school, I ran track really slowly.
What did you run? What races?
It was mostly the sort of mid-distance races because I was slow, and honestly, the races that I ended up doing drove my coach to suggest that I participate in field, so I became a shot put thrower. I played volleyball. I was a swimmer. I was a diver. I was a gymnast. Um, there are very few sports that I didn't try, at least. And I always loved. There's so much about sports that I love. When I went to college, I didn't look at college as a place to figure out my career. I went and studied things that fascinated me. And when I went into law school and when I started thinking about what my career should be after I got out of law school, I went back and looked at what I had done with the time that I had that wasn't structured. And that was sports. It was sports radio. It was technical theater. I was not an actor. I did set design and set construction. Um, I did the live news broadcasts for my college radio station. I did interviews. I really wanted to be a hockey announcer. I was a big hockey fan growing up, but hockey and skiing conflicted, and I ski raced in college, and so I couldn't really do the play-by-play. I was never around, or not around consistently enough during the games, but I did between periods interviews that we were able to tape during the week. And once I was a lawyer and started really thinking about how I wanted to spend my life and what I would see as successful, I went back to the things that I loved. And the things that I loved really revolved around sports and entertainment law.
Yeah. Most of we think that the podcast is designed to target young professionals and younger people that are trying to achieve, obviously, professional success, but also kind of with a sports background or sports being a part of it. How did playing sports when you were younger and through college help you both in school and then after school in your professional life?
Well, in school, I think you hear it a lot, but time management is critical if you're going to be a serious athlete at whatever level serious means to you. Right? That doesn't necessarily mean a professional athlete or an Olympic athlete, but if you're taking it seriously, you're training a lot. And if you're training a lot, that's time taken away from other things, which means you have to prioritize. You have to learn how to prioritize. Means you learn how to balance. And that to me was critical in my success, was figuring out how to manage all the different things that I wanted to do and I wanted to do well. I think sports is also a great driver in learning how to really dive deep in something and commit yourself to it and get up when you don't necessarily feel like moving, but you have to do it because you have a longer term goal, and it takes time. It's incremental, and I think that is a really important lesson, right? It's not about getting up one day and saying, okay, today I'm going to run twice as fast or jump twice as high or be twice the skier that I was yesterday. Each day you go back and you work hard and you make incremental improvements. And understanding that life can be about incremental improvements, I think, is a really important thing for everybody to learn. And lets you recognize that you can have failures on the way, but that doesn't mean you're not improving, and that it takes hard work. So I think during school, those were the most important lessons I took away. In my professional career, while those lessons flowed through my professional career as well, I think there's another factor, and that is part of what makes you a good lawyer, I believe, and a really beneficial guide to your clients, is that you understand what they're trying to achieve. And that doesn't mean that you have to do it with them, but it does mean that you have to get it. And in sports, getting it, I think, is a lot easier if you participate. There are plenty of great sports lawyers who have never been professional athletes. And again, I'm not suggesting you have to be the best athlete, but you need to get the emotion of it, understand how hard the athletes work, understand the challenges that they face, understand what the customer experience is like, what the customers are looking for, why they want to be at that sports event, whether it's a game or an event of some kind. And if you haven't participated in it in some way and really had a passion for it, I think it's harder. I think it's doable, but I think it's a lot harder. And one of the things that brought me back to deciding that I wanted to make my career out of sports is that as a young lawyer, I was working on cases that I wasn't necessarily passionate about, and and that I didn't understand. Clients who were in industries that didn't really mean anything to me. And if you don't understand the industry, it's really hard to effectively counsel, because you don't know where things are likely to go. You don't know what the trigger points are going to be. You don't know necessarily what motivates the customers, the participants, the business people. And I think being part of the activity, again, that can be as a spectator or as a participant, gives you an insight that is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. How about, and those are all great examples, skiing specific. Is there anything that, out of all of the sports you played, the most specialized in skiing and competing at high levels? Is there anything, specific to that sport that you've really, dialed back in and you reflect on, practices, character traits that you've learned specifically from skiing that have translated not only to your professional life, but now also to where you are back sort of within that industry?
I don't know that they are unique to skiing, but they were particular to skiing for me. And that part of what made skiing so special to me was it was very much a family sport for us. And my brother competed some, but it was more about the time spent with family. And part of what we try to do here at Aspen is really help our guests experience the passion and the connection to the outdoors. Skiing is one of those sports where oftentimes you don't have full internet connectivity. You're in the middle of the mountains. You're not trying to be on your phone. You're really trying to engage with your body, engage with nature, be present in the moment. And I think those are really important elements of at least my love and my passion for skiing. Again, that's not unique to skiing necessarily, but it's what I took away from it. And I think those traits, that commitment to being in the moment, to engaging with your surroundings, is a really important part of skiing that we here try to help our customers and our guests experience.
Yeah, Rana, Connor and I are both skiers. I think he's probably way better than me, and you're probably way better than both of us.
I was going to say, that means nothing.
But the cool thing about skiing is I think that so many people get to touch it and feel it. They can understand what the sport is like and how difficult and scary the actual sport of skiing would be. And the coolest thing I think the coolest thing I see when I'm skiing is whenever you're in Vail or Aspen or Salt Lake somewhere or something like that, and you're skiing kind of these big mountains, you always see the family that is skiing backcountry, and there's either one or two adults and two or three little kids following that adult, and they're little people. And I just look at them and say, I can't even come close to doing something like that, and I'd be terrified if I was doing that. And you have these people pushing the limit, so it's almost like kind of winning. I mean, for me, at least what they're doing, the winning is the ability to do what you try to do. And that's something totally unique for skiing compared to any other sport I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's one that it is, I have a huge amount of respect for anyone who takes up the sport of skiing as an adult. And we try really hard to make it welcoming to people. And it is a sport you can learn as an adult. But to your point, you're on the side of a mountain. Right? And yeah. I will never forget, I am not a snowboarder. I have snowboarded a couple of times in my life. The first time I snowboarded, I was 19 or 20, and my brother and I both decided we were going to take a lesson, and we had been skiing. We went, we were actually in Chile, in South America, and skied the mountain one day and found a green run, a beginner run. Said, all right, this is the one we're gonna take our snowboards on. Right, we know it's really flat. This should be easy. This is a great place to start. We put the snowboards on, and I had this moment of just like an oh my god moment where I suddenly went, whoa, I am on the side of a mountain. And when on the skis, I felt like I was on flat ground. It's a challenging sport, but it is one that when it doesn't take that many days to be, to be okay, where you're not falling down constantly, and to really be able to enjoy it, and to achieve something where you can, take the lift up and make it from the top of the lift down to the bottom, and have a real true sense of accomplishment. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, we were on the mountain last year actually, in our family. We had a discussion which was something along the lines of, if you just look around, everybody on the mountain, there's a common theme. If nothing else, everybody on that mountain has the commonality, which is they are doing something challenging. They're out in nature, taken away from, technology, their cell phone, like you said, Rana. So they all, if nothing else, it's one kind of common bond amongst everybody in the mountain that's going out there and skiing. Do you find that that trait similar to those that you're working with as well? Kind of everyone's sort of tied into a common bond.
We as a company really do try to do that. We talk about living passionately as one of our core principles. We have core guiding principles, and there is a real commitment to a lifestyle. Right? As a company, we run 4 mountains. We run a number of hotels and rental retail shops, but we live in the middle of the mountains. Our headquarters is in the Roaring Fork Valley. We are part of the community that we serve, and I think everybody here really feels that passion. There is a culture of being part of it. And it doesn't mean that everybody skis or snowboards, but they all value living in this environment, and they value that commitment to nature. And one of the things you said that struck me, that I think is important too in the realm of skiing, and I think it's true in other sports too, to greater and lesser degrees, is that one of the things that I particularly love about skiing is it's something where you can go out with your closest friends and have an incredibly hard day, work incredibly hard from the beginning to the end, right? Where you're on the go and you're sweating and you are, it doesn't matter that it's 20 degrees out because you're hot because you've been working your butt off, right? The whole day. Or you can go out with your 3-year-old daughter or son and ski. You'll be working your butt off that day too, but in a good way.
That's my hardest day.
And I think my favorite days are the days where I now have a 7 and an 8-year-old, and I have a father who still skis. He's 76 years old. And my favorite days are when the 3 generations are all skiing together. And you really can have generational bonds all participating in the sport in a way that is very, very special.
Yeah, one thing that's cool, like for me, a personal note about skiing is we've had all of our kids out skiing by the time they were 2 years, at the age of 2, I've had all of my kids in ski lessons. And there's something about sports and being outside and being with bigger people, adults, and it gives kids an incredible sense of pride when they can do it, when they can actually do some different things, and just seeing how their parents light up. And it's a pretty safe environment because they're so low to the ground. So I think skiing's been incredible. I mean, and one of the cool things about skiing specifically is that the novice person who is pretty good, will never be great, can still go to cool places, do cool things. The problem is I see someone like you or Connor out there doing really cool stuff, and I decide I got to try that. And I end up sliding on my butt all the way down, like some crazy black or in the backwoods, something like that.
I'm getting way too much credit here, Rana. I promise you, I'm not that great.
I can tell you're looking at him.
But yeah. I do love it.
What's interesting, though, in what you were just saying, another thing that I think is a little bit different about skiing in the United States today is you get a lot of kids who are learning it very young, but we don't drive them immediately into competition. And sure, if they want to, there are racing programs. But I think there's a real challenge in the United States that in a lot of our organized sports, we don't teach kids just the love of the game. We start them competing really young, right? Whether it's the soccer league where they're doing quote games, right, that really just look like a pack of kids running around from a really young age, or t-ball or baseball, or a lot of those sports were driving competition as a first, maybe not first, but as a very quick direction. Skiing is one of the few sports that Americans participate in a collaborative, engaging way where you don't have to win to participate. And honestly,
if you're having fun, you're winning.
You can. But that's not the core of what the American participation in the sport is.
That is so true, because to me, when I have my kids out there, if they're having fun and being safe, then we're winning. Yeah, it's amazing. No, it's hard. I mean, as you know, I have 3 kids, and I don't know what the right thing to do is. I know I want to spread my kids out to numerous sports, and I want them to choose what they want to do. But then you meet this psychotic dad who has their kid in like 3 different football leagues. You're like, oh my God, like my kids are never going to compete with his kid because I'm not investing the way he's investing. So it's just difficult.
The one thing to give you a little bit of hope on that front is there is some research that would suggest if you drive the kids into competition too early, they burn out and they don't learn the love of the game in the same way as if you let them just play around for a couple of years and come to the sport a little bit later.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I mean, I think my goal is exposure. I want to expose them to a lot of different things, and I'm hoping that they find something to be passionate about, and then I'll support them through that. But it's just hard because, like I said, there's so many parents out there that are just really driving their kids in one or different directions. And in Florida, baseball is a year-round, and then football is year-round, soccer is year-round, so it's crazy. As a kind of like a microcosm for society and sports, I mean, you being in Aspen, it's interesting because it's pretty isolated compared to a lot of places, and then the cultural divide there with the extremely wealthy and then the less fortunate, and how sports plays in that. Have you seen skiing particularly as a way that brings the community together from all walks of life in Aspen to have common ground and kind of bring, like I said, classes of people together to kind of like almost like a melting pot almost?
I think we would love to, but I can't say that we have succeeded yet in that. Skiing is a sport that has challenging barriers to entry. It's not the cheapest sport. It's not the cheapest sport to run, right? If you want to introduce somebody to soccer, you need an open space and a ball. You don't need anything more than that. To introduce them to skiing, you need skis, boots, poles, you need winter clothing, you need a lift, and the lift costs a lot of money to run. So it's harder. We really do try to reach out to members of the community who may not have as much interest and engage them with the sport. As an industry, the industry is looking to expand the participation in the sport of skiing, and trying to break down those barriers to entry, but there are some structural ones that make it challenging. I think if we could do it, it'd be great for everybody. I don't think there is anything inherent in the sport that is that keeps people apart, but the barriers to entering it are tough.
Yeah, Rana, it kind of flows with what I wanted to dive into, which is, being in the position that you currently are. What would you say are some of the biggest successes that you're seeing? And then also, what is, your biggest goal that you're currently involved with that you would like to kind of see over the hump?
Those are good questions. I think as an industry, one of the biggest successes right now are the expansion of multi-mountain passes, right? You had Vail launch the Epic Pass in, I guess, 2008. Then last year, the Icon Pass was launched, and that was developed by the Altera Mountain Company with a lot of input from the Aspen Skiing Company. There's a complicated legal structure between those two companies that we would get sidetracked if I went into that, but suffice it to say that part of the notion of the Icon Pass is a partnership model where not all of the resorts that are on the Icon Pass are owned by Alterra. There are actually more partners than there are owned resorts. And then you have the Mountain Collective, which are all independently owned resorts that have partnered together to provide a multi-mountain pass. There are some others that are out there. The Powder Alliance is out there. But the reason that I see these multi-mountain passes as a success for the industry is they are decreasing the price of getting a pass, and what we are all trying to do with them is make skiing more accessible, and say to the family of four who say, I would go for 2 weekends a year or 3 weekends a year, but I don't know that I can afford to pay window prices for each of those days. And if you, but they also say, but I don't want to just go to one place. And so if you buy the Icon Pass or you buy the Epic Pass or you buy a Mountain Collective Pass for significantly cheaper than it would be for you to buy a window ticket, you can have much greater access to skiing. And what we're hoping is that will really drive people to spend more time on the slopes, get people more engaged with the sport, and allow them to try out different areas and see what mountains work best for them, and ultimately chase the snow that they want, and meet up with their friends and make it more social. So if you're a group of your friends are going to a mountain, you can say, oh yeah, you know what, that works on my pass. I need to get myself there, but I don't need to worry about, okay, and what are lift tickets going to cost me if I go meet you there? I can just do that. So I think I'm really I'm encouraged by that. I think it's an exciting step for the industry, and I think it will be really good for skiers and for people who can become skiers, and in my view should become skiers. Goals, God, what am I trying to get over the hump? There's a lot of stuff here at Aspen that we're working on. Right now we are deep in the process of redesigning and redeveloping the original base area of Aspen Mountain. Aspen has 2 portals. One has a gondola on it, and the other, just a couple blocks away, was where ski racing first started at a high level in the United States. That side of the mountain, which is known in this town as the 1A area, or the Lift 1 area, because it's where the original first lift was, has several developers who own parcels at the base. We have a lift that goes down there, and we have been deep in a multi-year process to come up with a plan that works for everybody, for both developers, for the mountain, for the city of Aspen. There's a park that will be down there. There's a private family that owns a piece of land that's been donated to the city. So there will be a ski museum there, really collaborative process across a multitude of stakeholders that are trying to get over the finish line. We have the approvals, but we are still very much in the development process. So if I can see that over the hump to where there are 2 new hotels and a new lift and a ski museum and new ski services and 2 new restaurants at that part of the mountain, I'll be really excited.
That would be incredible. Rana, just curious, how long has that been in the process with all the various stakeholders? I can only imagine.
That depends on how you define that question. There was a collaborative community process that took place in, well before my time at Aspen, in I think 2009, that ultimately failed and fell apart. Maybe it was 2011. We then entered into a contract to sell part of our land. So in some sense, it's been going on for over a decade. The more recent push, where we landed on the plan that now has been approved, has been a year so far in the making, and ultimately, because there was public land involved, it had to go to a vote of the electorate within the city of Aspen, and was approved by a whopping 26 votes.
Wow, that's amazing. Jeez, oh man. Rana, one thing And I preface this question with the first time I met Rana, we had Moscow Mules at a bar together in Aspen. So I know something you do that I've noticed most every other very successful business person and attorney has in common is that you're a great storyteller. And you are not only a great storyteller, you have worked at Madison Square Garden and you worked at the U.S. Olympic Committee prior to working for Aspen Corporation. So if you could just tell us one or two cool stories about Madison Square Garden and then about the U.S. Olympic Committee.
That's it. Those are.
I've heard a couple cool ones. That's why I preface it because I know I can get some cool stuff out of
it. So my favorite Madison Square Garden story is actually my introduction to Madison Square Garden. So I grew up in New York City, and my dad was a Brooklyn Dodgers fan, huge Brooklyn Dodgers fan until the Dodgers left Brooklyn, at which point baseball was banned, and he and his friends switched to hockey. And he and my mom had season tickets to the Rangers from actually prior to me being born. When I was a year old, my brother was 4. Rangers were in the Stanley Cup Finals. My parents were at the game. We had a babysitter at home. My brother and I were not at the game. Pre-cell phones, obviously. Game went into overtime. My parents run down to the payphones, call the babysitter. Game's going into overtime. You have to stay. She sort of went, all right. Game went into the second. The overtime finishes. Still tied. Run back downstairs. There's going to be a double overtime. You have to stay. She's less thrilled. Ultimately, that overtime ends. My dad calls, and the way the story is told in my house, whether it's true or not, I don't know. But the way the story is told, she basically said, "Someone needs to come here and watch your kids because I'm leaving." So my mom stayed at the Garden. My dad goes running downstairs, hops into a cab, takes the cab across Manhattan, runs into our apartment, grabs my brother and I out of bed at some ungodly hour. It's got to be 11:30 or 12 o'clock. I don't know what time it was. Throws us back into the cab that's waiting, drives back across town, brings us into the building. So we were both in the building when Pete Stemkowski scored in triple overtime for the Rangers to win the game.
Wow, that's amazing.
That is an amazing,
and so
super cool story.
Story.
A father's love.
My whole life, I get the job at Madison Square Garden, and walking in for my first day at work, and in the offices of the Garden, which are in Two Penn Plaza, or were at the time, our offices were Two Penn Plaza, right in front of the Garden. There were all these historic pictures all around, right? Different events at the Garden. Everything from Muhammad Ali to Knicks pictures to concerts to all sorts of stuff. And they walked me to my office, and the photograph that is hanging on the wall outside of my office is Pete Stemkowski scoring in triple overtime. And
that's cool.
I am never leaving.
That is
a little bit of destiny right there.
That is absolute destiny if I ever heard it.
It was
cool.
It was pretty amazing. And I loved my time at the Garden. I still love the people there. I don't know that I would have left the Garden if I hadn't left New York. It was not about leaving that job. It was about moving on to the next phase of my life. And so when I moved out to Colorado, I ended up working for the U.S. Olympic Committee. And I think probably the most amazing story of the U.S. Olympic Committee, God, that's a hard one because there were so many. But what was fascinating to me about the Olympics is that it's really a global movement. And the people who are part of the Olympic family believe in it so powerfully. And they don't always do the right thing. And, they often don't have the resources to do all the things that they want to do. But it was so incredible to me to be part of what really is a movement. I mean, they call it the Olympic movement for a reason, right? It was founded, and I hadn't known this until I joined the USOC, but it was founded by a number of people, and I can't remember the total number, but a number of people who ultimately went on for different reasons to win the Nobel Peace Prize. And it was initially envisioned as a peace movement, as a way of breaking down boundaries, as a way of valuing humanity and elevating humanity and showing people that we're all human. And one of the things that they do at the Olympics that I, again, hadn't really focused on, despite loving the Olympics before going to the Olympic movement, is that during opening ceremonies of every Olympic Games, you walk in by country, and you walk behind your flag, and it's very much a proud moment by nation, right? That's a very important part of the games. There are competitions between nations and among nations, and there's lots of symbolism about who, when North Korea and South Korea march, or when the Soviet Union stopped being the Soviet Union, and you had Russia marching, right? Lots of different symbolism on marching into the Olympic Stadium. But what I didn't know is that at the closing ceremonies of the Olympics, nobody walks behind a flag. They all walk in as a mob. And you walk in with the people that you've come to know and come to experience this amazing 2-week adventure with, and you have new friendships, new relationships, and it's all just one big group of humans. And I always thought that was one of the most powerful things that doesn't often get talked about in the Olympics, but I think it's a really important part of what that movement tries to do.
Yeah. In the last couple of years, I've negotiated several contracts for pro athletes in Olympic sports, and then outside of Olympic sports in kind of the more major football, baseball, basketball, hockey. And one thing that's interesting is the passion for the Olympic sports, at least from what I've seen doing those deals, is at a different level than the other sports, because with the NFL, baseball, or basketball contracts, we don't even really talk about sports. It's more just about literally dollars and kind of the very high-end marquee points of the contract. But with the Olympic deals, we're getting much more into the nitty-gritty of the contracts, and the passion involved is incredible. And the amount of knowledge on the corporate side for those contracts is incredible. Normally it's because the CEO of the company or owner of the company has a vested interest for some reason in skiing, sailing, whatever it might be, and they want to push through the contract and want to not only have it be financially successful, commercially successful, but they want to help the sport, which is not a contract, which is incredible.
It is big business. I don't want to suggest otherwise. It has become big business, but at the same time, it isn't. And you have professional athletes who are participating, and you have athletes in sports making significant amounts of money and making their careers on it. But you also have people who are participating in sports that the only time they're ever on TV is during the Olympic Games, or now with the Olympic Channel, some of them are on television. But they're not doing it because they're going to get a paycheck. They're getting a paycheck so that they can do it, right? It's a very different dynamic, and that is not to suggest that professional athletes don't have passion. For them to be as capable as they are, they have to have an incredible passion. But professional sports, at least in the United States, have truly, they're acknowledged as a business, and they're a valuable, beneficial business. But there's a different overlay, right? If you're an archer, or a water polo player, or a taekwondo athlete, you're doing that sport at the highest levels because you have a personal inherent passion. And if you're a company that is supporting that sport, you're supporting that sport because you care about it.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think, passion's kind of a common theme that we keep sort of repeating. And Rana, that's something that I wanted to bring up, kind of taking a step back from, your story, hopping into the Olympic Committee. Before that, you mentioned how much you loved working at the Garden and your work there. Yet, you decided to take that leap. Just reading some of your quotes from various interviews, talking about, exploring, opportunities while in or without of your quote unquote job description, continuing to stretch yourself, passionately, working hard, playing hard, all of these things. I'm very much of the same mindset. I think people would really take hold to, you know, back in that, that time frame when you did decide to leave to the Garden to go out west. What really drove that, even though you might not have entirely been ready to say goodbye?
It was very much a personal decision that was not driven as a professional decision. One of the things that, as I said, my parents really instilled in me a belief that that if you could make your hobby your career, you won. And I believe that wholeheartedly. But I also, another fact or another element that they instilled in me is that while the time spent at your job and in your career is a big part of your life, it shouldn't be the only thing in your life, and it shouldn't be, it shouldn't be the driver of everything. And I met the person who's now my husband. He was living in Boston, and I was living in New York, and we were trying to figure out what would make sense for us. He is not an East Coast person, and really did not want to move to New York. He wanted to come west, and I was at a stage in my career where I felt very good about what I was doing career-wise, but I felt like it was time for me to focus on my personal life some. And I have never been afraid to take risks. In part, I've been very lucky. I have always had a safety net, and I know I have a safety net. Graduating from Harvard gives you a safety net. I come from a family of lawyers. I knew that if I couldn't work in my in the job I wanted, I knew I could always find a job in law. My dad had a firm and would have loved for me to come to work with him. So I had a safety net, and I don't want to dismiss that, because not everybody does. But having that safety net, I felt an obligation then to take risks to see if I couldn't make my life the life I wanted it to be in all respects. And Brian wanted to move west, and I said, this is worth trying. And I think we have a relationship that's special. I had always felt a pull to the west, but had never been willing to do it on my own. And so he and I decided we were going to move to Colorado, move to Denver originally. And he looked for a job and got one in about 12 seconds, which scared both of us. And then he was going to move out. And I said, well, you know what, I'm going to keep looking. And I networked with the people that I knew, and, tried to understand the industry, the sports industry in Colorado, but also said, if I need to take a break and take 6 months and see whether this relationship works first, I'll do that. And I felt good about that decision. Again, I recognized that I was incredibly fortunate in having the flexibility to do that. But if you have that flexibility, then I think it's incumbent upon you to take advantage of it.
Yeah. What's interesting is all three of the people on the podcast right now, both you, me, and Connor, all got drawn to relatively the same place for different reasons. Because Connor was the starting quarterback at the Air Force Academy. I went to Colorado, lived in south of Denver a couple of years for my son's neurological rehabilitation. You went there for what you just described. So it's amazing how we all kind of end up in the same place for a period of time in very close proximity to each other. Rana, you were at the USOC, obviously at a time when there was a lot of hot button issues. Maybe the most important, or at least the most kind of hot button from an outsider perspective, was the PED issue. When you were there, without disclosing anything attorney-client privilege or confidential, what was it like being there at a time when PEDs were just hitting the news all the time and putting a negative face on otherwise beautiful Olympic community, sport community, and that kind of thing?
We took it very seriously. We worked really hard and in collaboration with the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency, and that relationship, the contract with them, and then the day-to-day relationship with them, sat with me a lot of the time that I was there. Not entirely, obviously, lots of different contact points, but I really saw that as one of my responsibilities in my relationships. I think it's a sad statement that goes back a little bit to what we were talking about earlier about the crazy parent who is pushing their kid for the wrong reasons, right? And pushing their kid because there's this demand and need to be better. And even if you can't do it the right way. And I think, the coaches and the clean athletes and the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency and the U.S. Olympic Committee really pushed back as hard as we could. I mean, it's a lopsided balance, right? Where you have people who can break every rule and spend a lot of money to create new drugs, and you're always chasing them. But I think it's much more about instilling the right culture, and that's not the USOC's job alone. That is not a sports job alone. It is society's job, and we as a society really have to teach our kids that it isn't, winning isn't. It's not winning is everything. It's not winning is the only thing. It's winning the right way is what's so powerful, right? And that means putting that hard work in and doing it by the rules. And I felt really bad for the athletes who said, look, if everybody around me is cheating, how can I compete with them? And what can we do to ensure that every athlete around me isn't cheating? One of the things that while I was there, we created the Partnership for Clean Competition in collaboration with some of the professional sports leagues to really try and neutralize a little bit the fight on how you test for these drugs and try and help drive research that the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency couldn't do by themselves. But so we tried to collaborate with Major League Baseball, with the NFL, with other sports leagues to try and balance that field, because it's not just an Olympic issue. It's a sports issue.
Oh, no. Yeah, for sure. No, it's amazing. I mean, 'cause I follow the UFC pretty closely, and a lot of the people several of the U.S. attorneys that prosecuted the PD cases that worked with you all and with the U.S. anti-doping, they're now kind of in roles with UFC and NFL, and the testing is so good now that they're actually, part of their job is to find false negatives, because the technology is so great in finding, basically trace. If a company were put through some product that had some trace element that was against the rules, and then months later they were to reprocess something different that had nothing in it that was contaminated, there was still a possibility of some contamination because they're testing such a small degree now of minute levels of this stuff in the substances. So it's amazing how much this has come along in a lot of ways. And it's in our lifetime too, because when we were younger, the testing was so far behind the drug makers. And now I'm sure there are some people doing things that are breaking the rules and they're getting away with it. But generally it feels like, I think people do have a fair shot and a fair shake if they are following the rules and not doping, because the science is so good that people are getting caught. Yeah. And then to me, the benefit is how many guys should have played Major League Baseball that didn't because they followed the rules, and guys got in that were breaking the rules for the same thing for any sport. And how many families would have been changed, communities would have been changed because of that, and it didn't happen because people broke the rules and got an advantage over that. So, the science is amazing. Yeah, Rana, one thing we do for each of our podcasts to make it kind of fun and lighten things up, and actually my favorite part of the podcast, is we ask everyone kind of a list of the same exact questions, just to get kind of a spectrum of what people's answers are from different walks of life, places in the world, stuff like that. What is the number one song that motivates you both in the office and in the weight room? What's your go-to song when you got to hit it
God, that
hard?
is tough.
You got to get up
That
and
has
go, keep
actually
going?
changed over time. There is a Stain song that, God, I haven't listened to in a while, but that was my go-to for a long time. And the funny thing, actually, when I was racing, my go-to was actually a calming song. I would, before every race, I would plug in and listen to Allison by Elvis Costello because it would drop my heart rate. It would let me get into the zone where I could just sort of focus on, all right, what am I trying to do here?
Wow.
So very different ends of the spectrum on those two. I listen to Red Hot Chili Peppers a bunch as I'm working out now. But I don't know that I have one go-to song right now.
I love it.
All right, same question, but movie. What is the movie you would put on to motivate you, both exercise, sports-wise, and business-wise?
I actually have moved away from, and this is one of the beautiful things about living where I live, I don't exercise in front of a television. I exercise outside. I climb mountains.
That's nice. Yeah.
Very nice. Very jealous. There's not many mountains here in Florida to be climbing.
Yeah.
What about we always go through books. So anything that you're currently reading?
So I am
or
currently
to?
reading Clan of the Cave Bear, about which is a novel that takes place among Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal man. It's this very detailed research book. It's a whole series of books about the origins of human life, or humanity and human culture. So I'm reading that. That's my novel that I am reading, and I am reading a couple different books about climate change, because I am so scared about where we are going as a globe, and what can be done about it. So I have a couple different books on my nightstand that are looking at climate change solutions and risks and how we can motivate people to live a little bit more sustainable life, and how we can change society so that we can get away from fossil fuels. So that's what's on my bookshelf right now.
Yeah. What is the author of the the first book you mentioned?
I don't even know how she pronounces it. Aul, Aeul.
Okay. Cool.
It sounds familiar. David,
I read that book. That was a good book.
A book called Sapiens. Did you? I'm about to pick it up. So I've heard it too many times recently to not.
He takes a very interesting approach that I'm not sure I 100% agree with him, but he's got some fascinating sort of reframing of issues. Like I don't want to dive too deep if you're about to read it, but he reframes the agricultural revolution and talks about how we really ought not think that we domesticated wheat, that really we've been domesticated by wheat because we're working for them.
That's very interesting. Yeah, no, I've heard mixed reviews, but everyone has a stance that it's extremely interesting and it'll make you think.
Yeah, that's very cool. So another question we asked everybody is, and this is more of a serious question: if you could tell anything to your high school self and give yourself advice, what would the advice be?
I think that'd be my advice. Right? There were times, in high school where it was tough, and I think you spend too much time when you're in high school trying to figure out how you fit in with the people around you and with the world around you, rather than focusing on who you are and how you can shape the world around you and the people around you to match you. So stick with it and stay true to who you are.
Yeah, I mean, stick with it and that goes across every single part of your life when it comes to marriage, being a parent, business, sports, everything. If you pick something and stick with it, that will. What some quotes? I mean, like, obviously, you never lose till you quit, stuff like that. But
the grind. It's today's day and age, I feel like it's very, in a society of instant gratification, it's tough to stick with something or see it through if you're not instantly seeing the fruits.
Getting likes, yeah. Yeah, Rana, so we're almost going to wrap it up, but some of the things you said earlier really, I thought were interesting. I've started getting, as more of a senior lawyer now, I've started getting into the hiring process, recruiting process, and we had a speaker come in that was not part of Hall tonight, but was an outsider coming in to talk about talent evaluation and hiring, firing, and getting the right fit for people into your organization. And something she had talked about was just the value of someone who balances multiple things as they're coming up through school. And she specifically referenced military and sports and stuff like that. And I thought that was really interesting because you mentioned that earlier, just about what you learned from sports and how handling multiple things at once and handling them at a high level. And then something else she mentioned that I thought really was interesting was just about a winning culture. And I think that it's something that you and a couple other people that have reached really the pinnacle of both law and sports from a professional perspective. It's just having an idea of winning every day and having tasks be designed to win whatever it is. And like we talked about with skiing, there's a different definition of winning, but I think tackling the world in that sense of almost like an athlete and whatever you choose to do, whether it be exercising, whether it be writing a memo or writing a motion, whatever it is, or landing a new client, selling a car, whatever it might be, is having this a constant idea of competing with yourself, winning, that kind of thing. But like you said, not to a level where it's corrosive, but just something in the back of your mind saying, keep going, keep going, keep going, I think is really valuable. And what she said was, now the trick is, how do you find that? Because that's the $1 billion question that every company in America or in the world is trying to do. And it's elusive, obviously. But a couple of things you said earlier, really kind of rang true to what she was saying.
It's interesting. I wouldn't frame it as a culture of winning, though. I think I agree with the substance of what you're saying. I think it's about progress, right? And progression, and knowing that it doesn't have to be a win-loss, right? One of the things that I value so much here and at some of my other jobs has been a culture of collaboration where you don't have to lose for me to win. If I'm moving forward, or if in the big picture we're both moving forward, that's success. And I think we too often use the word win in its in the sense of a zero-sum game, and I struggle with that. I find that not to be an approach that works for me. Right? I don't want to have to beat somebody. I want to always get better. So one of the things we talk about here is continuous improvement, and just always trying to progress. And if you're moving forward, you're winning. If you need to use the winning word.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree completely. Absolutely. Well, I guess for me, it's, as we get older, all the cliches are true, right? And winning, it's a subjective term, really. To me, what you just described is winning at a macro level.
I think it can be. I think it's just, I worry that people hear it and immediately move to sort of game theory, zero-sum dynamics, and that, I think, sells everybody short.
Yeah. Well, especially in the line of work, Rana, like you discussed earlier, even the project at the base of the mountain. When there are so many stakeholders involved, winning, they're winning in the the zero sense, that cannot happen. If so, no one is winning. So it makes complete sense in what you kind of brought it up and how you phrased it.
Yeah. Well, let me close with this, Rana. Is when the SBLA expanded outside of Florida, the first state we expanded into was Colorado. And when we did that, we put together a list of people who we thought were influential and who we thought if we had their buy-in, it would really mean a hell of a lot. And I met you several years ago, and you bought in a big way, and you've spoken at several of our events. You spearhead one of probably my favorite charitable function we do every year, which is paying for kids to go skiing in Aspen that otherwise likely would not have that opportunity. So thank you for what you have done for the Sports Business Leadership Association. And if you Google your name into Google, if you Google your name, it's just amazing what comes back. And the fact that we're associated with you and that you bought in and support
for all
us
that you
is
do
incredible.
With it.
I thank you for that.
Would never come here had it not been for your effort and your commitment to making it happen and your belief in the power of sport to help kids. So kudos to you for making that happen.
Yeah, well, I think where I'm hoping it's going, I mean, it keeps expanding, keeps growing, and the thing we're doing in Aspen every year, which I'm committed to doing every single year going forward, I'm hoping we can just do that at a broader level and really maybe even bring sports to villages, to communities, because, I mean, I think like Connor said about skiing, if you go to a ski resort, Vail, Deer Valley, Aspen, it's just this cross-section of people, and everyone's pretty happy.
Yeah.
And they hold doors open for you, and it's just collegial. And you have the one guy who's running over little kids, but that's the vast, rare occasion. Yeah. You have the one guy getting chased down by the ski patrol, getting his thing cut. Yeah. But I mean, I think sports has the ability to do that across the board. And like you said, hopefully, I think it brings people into community and teaches them, like you said, the balance of working together, progressing together. And this gives people kind of a taste of how to do that. And they do it in sports. They can do it outside of sports too.
100%.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, Rana, that's it. I appreciate you being on our podcast. And you're amazing. Like I said, I knew you were a great storyteller. So I appreciate all your stories and being on the podcast.
Yep. Take care.
Thanks, Rana. Bye.
Thanks, Rana. Bye. And that's today's ticket. Remember, where you're at today is not going to be where you end up. We hope podcasts like this help you find your ticket to health, wealth, and happiness. If you like what you heard, punch your ticket with our team and follow us at Ticket Productions. Until next time, get up, get moving, and make a positive impact on today.